Who put the putt-putt in the automotive industry? We'll tell you this week on Motoring 2000.
TSN's Motoring 2000 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them, and Midas Car Care, the way it should be.
You know, it's said what goes around comes around. Well, the auto industry certainly understands that. I mean, forget minivans and sport utilities. The industry today is making a ton of money off of the baby boomer. You know, the guys who are going through a midlife crisis, maybe trying to recapture their youth. The result, the industry comes up with the new T-Bird and the Prowler and the Boxster and the Z3, and now the newest kid on the block, the Honda S2000 Roadster. You know, when Honda hit the shores of North America in the early 70s with the Civic, they set a whole new benchmark on how cars should be manufactured as well as sold. Well, with this new Roadster, Honda is now convinced that they have set that bar even higher.
Well, as you know, Mr. Honda's passion and his dream was always around racing, and this is almost like a 50-year anniversary gift from the R&D department, which is really the core and the center and the backbone of Honda in Japan and worldwide. And it was a gift from the engineering team to the dealers and consumers. So that was really the focus here, to something that would help us elevate our brand image as well.
But let's go back to the beginning. 50 years ago, Mr. Honda's first product was a motorized bike, affectionately called the Putt-Putt.
Mr. Honda started right after the war, buying surplus military engines, and felt that there was a use for them, or further use, and in his quest for improvement, adapted them to a bicycle, and of course, that began the history of Honda.
But today, the world's newest sports car can hardly be dubbed a putt-putt. The S2000 is rear-wheel drive, powered by a 2-liter inline-4 VTEC engine. It produces 120 horsepower per liter, more than any other naturally aspirated production engine on the planet.
Well, it is a fresh engine from the ground up. We had engineers in the past that built the 1.5-liter twin turbocharged F1 engine, and it developed up to 1,000 horsepower. Those engineers are probably not involved in Formula One anymore, and they're now working on this kind of project. So they took some of that expertise and made a very, very small, compact 2-liter engine, develops 240 horsepower. That's 120 horsepower per liter. And the other unique part about the engine is it has a kind of a ladder frame bottom end in it. It's straight out of racing car technology, where it gives us a really strong bottom end, and that allows it to rev to 9,000 RPM.
The car is pure Honda, and of course we looked at the other competitors, but we have some challenging spirit, which we have had since our founder established the company. So still, we love racing and sports and sports-minded.
I think they've raised the benchmark. They've put a lot of Formula One engine technology into this car. Their main competitors, the BMW Z3 and the Porsche Boxster, are very, very nice cars, but I think this one sort of sets the new standard with just total vehicle layout and exterior design.
It's a good handling car. I wouldn't call it a great handling car. And if I can get technical on you for a minute, there's a big difference in the roll centers of the front versus the rear. The roll center of the front end is 48 millimeters, the rear is 99, which means that when you go into a corner really quick, the back end starts to roll into the corner a little bit more than the front end. Those numbers are identical to the Acura NSX, which is a very good handling car. But the Acura NSX has a key difference. The engine is mid-mounted, whereas this is the engine in the front. So the car has a tendency to be a little bit, tail happy when you come into the corners and when you put the power down as well. I was passing some cars and I was looking in my rear view mirror to make sure that everybody was all right. And I just left the braking just a little bit too late. But no harm, no foul. This is what it's all about. Now, as far as driving it on the road is concerned, there's absolutely no problem. I mean, the fact that the rear roll center is higher actually will make the car better for the everyday average driver. It's just when you go really, really quick on the racetrack, sometimes it can get a little bit ahead of you.
So it looks like Honda has a winner, but production will be limited, with only about 5,500 cars coming to North America. But in this day of big mergers, Honda is happy to stay small and independent.
Our philosophy is, we call it small is smart. And we think for us, the important thing is speed or efficiency and flexibility. Yeah? And Honda start everything with a very tiny, small thing. But after 50 years, we have grown bigger. But we still keep in our mind the spirit of small is smart.
The Honda S2000, it's a great car, but there have been great Japanese sports cars before that haven't succeeded. More on that later on Kenzie's Corner.
Even before Mazda launched the original MPV, it was outdated, not so much because there was anything wrong with it, but purely and simply because it did not conform to the minivan norm. Well, that was then. This is the future, the all-new 2000 edition of the MPV. The MPV's rework started with a completely new platform. The track is wider and the wheelbase is up by 35mm. This bigger footprint and a better roll access gives the new MP a very solid, stable feel. The McPherson strut front suspension and torsion beam rear suspension contribute by delivering a decent blend of ride comfort and handling. During the test, the MPV ripped through the pylons better than any other minivan, primarily because the amount of roll has been kept to a minimum. The on-center feel offered by the rack and pinion steering and superior damping characteristics round out a very competent dynamic package. Power comes from Ford's 2.5-litre 24-valve twin-cam Duratec motor, an engine good for 170 horsepower and 165 pounds-feet of torque. This engine is, however, one of the weaker links in the overall execution. True, it does produce decent response between 3,000 and 4,000 RPM, but it's breathless below that and produces little other than noise above those figures. While disappointing, it's not as bad as it sounds. Sure, the MPV could do with more power, but there is a saving grace. 90% of your normal driving falls within the sweet part of the rev range, and so the performance is not as windy as I expected. As with the Odyssey, the highlight of the interior of this van is the rear seat. Fold it down, we're now in party mode. When you want to fold it away, again, very simple. 2 quick moves and the whole lot folds down into the floor. There is, however, a problem. The rear seat heater controls, they sit right next to the seat you fold away the most. And no, it doesn't make any sense to me either. The other area there's a distinct collaboration between Honda and Mazda is in the center seats. Now, if you're a parent, you really appreciate the space between these two seats because it keeps the kids apart. However, when it's time to make up your honey, you can just slide on over. Elsewhere, the all-important comfort and convenience items are all in place, even in the base DX model. The 100-watt AM/FM CD 4-speaker audio system features operating controls about 7 times larger than the conventional, and the indication lettering is about 1.5 times the norm, all of which means it's very easy to operate the controls relying on nothing more than peripheral vision and feel. Another area Mazda may want to rethink is the decision to exclude anti-lock brakes from the base DX model. With an entry-level price of $24,555, the MPV enjoys quite a pricing advantage. Upping that base price by about $1,000 to include ABS should have little or no effect on the decision to buy an MPV versus one of the competitors. When equipped with the ABS and electronic brake distribution, the front disc rear drum is easily modulated and stops the van in just 34.8 meters from 80 kilometers an hour. Engine aside, Mazda have successfully transformed the MPV from a non-conformist into a contender that's very easy to live with. It also happens to be the equal of the Toyota Sienna and streets ahead of its domestic competition.
Some real classics here today. I would have to tell you that some of the 50s are my favorites, and certainly the 63 Corvettes rank high on my list. And with a turnout as incredible as this, we've just never seen so many put together in one location, that's for sure.
What's your name?
We're tremendously honored to have David here, to have driven up from the Detroit, Michigan area here this morning as the chief engineer of the new C5. It's a true honor for us, and as I watch David in action here in our showroom today, it's like watching Wayne Gretzky sign autographs.
Hi, how are you doing? We've carried on this tradition now for 47 years, since '53, and we're in the 5th generation, and enjoying a remarkable sales success, both here in North America and around the world as well.
Well, it's a 56, I think around 3,700 around that made, 3,600 and something. He's got power windows, I think there were 500 and some made with that. 265 with 2 4-barrel carburetors and with a 2-speed power glide on it, so that's a little different too. It's a good car. It's been a great car, and it doesn't cost you much to keep it up. Everything is simple. You still get parts for it, and you know, price is the name of the game too. You know, and then it seems to go up in value every year too, which is nice. Not that I'm going to sell it. But,
What's it worth?
It was appraised at 50. You know, so. I guess it's what you can get for them too. Like, you know, they always say quite a bit of money, but you know, whether you get it or not, it's a different thing.
My dad had a 71, and I've always loved Corvettes, and the new 97s came out and they were beautiful, and just had to have one. Some of the features are, of course, it's convertible. I changed the deck lid on the back to the original pace car look. The hood is a little different with air scoops going down. There's roll bars put in and two-toned the leather a bit, changed the stitching around and little things like that. Change the wheels. Wheels make a difference on the car. Different tires. Just overall love it. It's like one big family here. Every Corvette is beautiful, and whether it's new or whether it's the first one, you know, way back in the 50s, but they're all beautiful, and they each have their own different characteristics.
It's a great North American sports car, and I think when you look at the tremendous number of automobiles in the world that try and position themselves for the stature of the top engineered sports car, now that we've got what we've got in the years of history, I think it's just wonderful as a North American and a Canadian to know that we've got something that can compete in the world.
We're going to call this Midas tip looking for dirt in all the wrong places. When you wash your vehicle, you get the obvious grunge off the outside, but quite often there's grit and dirt lurking in places where you can't see, and here's a perfect example. Now these nice molded mud flaps fit the body pretty well, but in behind them you're going to find dirt gathers in there sooner or later. Here's a perfect example. You can see quite a bit of it down here, and eventually it'll chafe through the paint, rub little holes in the paint, and if it's sheet metal, it's going to cause you a problem. On this particular car right here, this bumper cover is a soft material, plastic or urethane in many cases. It doesn't matter if the paint gets knocked off. But at the front of this very same car, the same mud flap is installed over sheet metal, and there's already some paint rubbed off, and there's going to be rust there shortly. So what you do is make sure you clean these areas out, get all the grit out of there, touch up any paint that's rubbed off, and put a little bit of rust inhibitor in behind there if you drive the car during the winter months. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Richard Russell of Halifax was among the auto journalists on hand for the launch of the Honda 2000 Roadster. Along with testing new cars, Richard spends a great deal of time on driver education.
AAA, the American Automobile Association, had been the primary supplier of driver training resources for probably 75 years. They publish 2 books, one called How to Drive and one called Responsible Driving. They do 1.5 million copies of this thing, so it's a huge volume of books. It's unique in that it's part of a system. That is called the Teacher's Wraparound Edition. There's one that is 7/8 the scale of that the students get, and with it go a whole bunch of support materials from videotapes to overheads and all the teaching aids, if you like, used in the classroom. So it's part of a whole system, and it is probably the most complete system used in North America today. This new curriculum will require 10 hours at the wheel and 40 hours of mentor or parent involvement. So the student will have 50 hours of training at the wheel before the program is completed. That is a huge step, and what we hope will cut the death rate among young people.
Richard Russell told me that 45% of all first-time drivers get in an accident in their first year. What's the answer? Well, more time behind the wheel with mom and dad, and of course, driver education. And I've been driving longer than I want to admit, but this book is without a doubt the most comprehensive I've seen. Unfortunately, as we speak, the book and the course is only available in the United States and not here in Canada. And hopefully that will change in the near future. All right, now let's head to the garage and join Bill Gardner.
Well, Brad, regular stop for me every morning is the coffee shop, and the other morning I was at Tim Hortons picking up a coffee, and one of the ladies that works there, Donna, asked me to have a quick look at her car. Her wipers weren't working properly, and it was raining that morning, so she was having some real hard times. Now, when we looked at the car, we noticed more than one problem. First of all, her blades were worn out, and the wiper arm on the passenger side is partially seized. Now, on the driver's side, the arm is free, and it's pushing the blade down against the glass, and the blade's at 90 degrees to the glass, so it's not bent. From time to time, these things get bowed down like this or twisted side to side from going through automatic car washes, and that could be a real problem. And in that case, quite often you'll have to replace this whole wiper arm, maybe as well as the blade. You can see how old this blade is by the rust that's on it and how much paint's worn off. But when you come over to the passenger side, when I lifted up the wiper arm, you can see it didn't go back down against the glass. I can lift it up and it'll hold almost any position that I put it in. The spring that's under here that's supposed to drive the blade down tight against the glass can't overcome the seizure in this pivot area here and get the blade down tight against the glass. Now, Donna went out and bought some little springs to add to these wiper arms to try and give it some more tension. And these things do, in some cases, do the trick and work well. But the actual problem is we need to free it up here and change the blades. And we're going to change to a different style of blade that's got a bit of a ducktail to it that's going to push the blade down against the glass as she goes faster. Okay, now we're going to get our penetrating fluid and just spray it in this pivot. Right now you can see the arm is hung up, it's stuck in the up position. So I'm just going to spray a little bit of liquid wrench in there, and then I'm going to work this thing up and down until it frees up. And you can see how quickly this stuff works because it's already trying to drive the wiper arm down against the windshield. And you don't want to splash too much of this around for obvious reasons. If it gets on your new blades or on your glass, you're going to have a heck of a mess. So just use a little bit, that's usually all it takes. Move it around a bit and it frees up. Another thing that helps out is occasionally when you're cleaning your windows with a squeegee, you lift this up to get under it with the squeegee. Just the fact that you move it around helps to free it up. Okay, there's our new blade. This one's a side pin. Just goes on something like that, and this little intermediate piece drops in and then pushes across to lock it in place so it can't come off the pin. You can see the ducktail that's designed into this blade. The faster you go, the more the wind pushes down on that ducktail and drives it down tight against the windshield. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind, these obviously are old blades, but if you've got relatively good looking blades and they're still not working properly, before you scrap them or throw them out, take some Windex or some glass cleaner and just soak a spot on a clean paper towel and wipe the sides of the rubber element. And when you come up with gunge like that, it's an indication that you might have had some things like tree sap, bird droppings, etc. on the side of this blade element, and it gets smeared into your windshield every time you turn the wipers on. So simply cleaning off the element might do the trick. Now, next week we're going to talk about the myriad of different ways that these things attach, all the different styles of wiper blades, because there's all kinds of different ones, and which are the best ones that you should buy for your car. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2000.
I was on a press trip in Sweden a few years ago. We were on a bus heading into Gothenburg. Now, I always sit at the back of the bus. With my colleagues, it's a good idea to keep them in front of you, if you know what I mean. And most of them were nodding off. It was near the end of the trip. They were tired, and frankly, they're a bit older than I am. But I could see their heads, one by one, popping up as they looked off to the right and spotted this beautiful 300ZX Nissan parked at the side of the road. Well, it wasn't that car, but it was exactly like that one. And I started thinking, what a shame that they couldn't make a success of that car in North America. It seems like we're not prepared to spend $40,000 for a Japanese sports car, no matter how good it is. I mean, you look at the Mazda RX-7 twin turbo, the Toyota Supra, or even the Acura NSX at a higher price level, none of them have sold to the degree that their styling, performance, and value would warrant. And yet when they were discontinued, the Germans came out with a BMW Z3, Porsche Boxster, Mercedes SLK, less performance, higher price, and they can't build them fast enough. What's going on? Well, I don't know. The German companies have a long tradition in motorsports, and maybe that's critical to sports car success. The Japanese companies are trying, but maybe they're just not there yet. Now, Nissan is coming out with a new Z car in a couple of years' time, but it's going to be based more on the concept of the original 240Z. It's going to be smaller, a little less performance, and a whole lot lower priced. I'm not going to argue with that, but in a sense it's a shame because it's almost denying the heritage of the 300, which will surely go down in history as one of the great cars of all time. Why weren't they more successful? If I knew the answer to that, I'd be running this company. I'm Jim Kenzie.
You know, whenever we drive new vehicles on motoring, no matter how much we like the vehicle, we always try and find out, is this car a head turner? Are other people noticing it? Well, as you can see, this new Honda Roadster is getting lots of notice out here in Lake Louise, Alberta. As we mentioned earlier, only 500 or 600 cars are coming to Canada. They're probably already sold. In fact, Honda could probably sell double that number. But as we saw earlier, for Honda, small is smarter. As long as they're making money, who's going to argue? Make sure you join us next week. Among other things, Graham Fletcher will be getting behind the wheel of the new Roadster on Test Drive. That and more as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
TSN's Motoring 2000 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them, and Midas Car Care, the way it should be.